Welcome everybody to episode number 312 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I am Brian Goulet here at gouletpens.com. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about water-resistant ink recommendations, what authorized retailers actually do, and why that even matters, swapping out a Sailor TUZU nib, where have all the TWSBI Vac Minis gone, some of my favorite drummers, and I'll be spotlighting the new TWSBI ECO Matcha. So it'll be a good time. Hope you enjoy it, and let's start out with feedback. All right, starting out with Karen, 1946, says, I have a similar issue as the Buenos Aires question from last week. I live in Maryland, and my pen is high capacity, and I saw condensation and leakage, but I only see these things on that pen with one specific ink. The other ink doesn't behave that way. So I think if the pen has a juicy nib like mine does, and the ink is wet, that might happen maybe. Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. It's sort of like I mentioned in that question. If you go back and listen to it, the nature of the question, if you don't feel like going back and finding it or don't remember, whatever, it's totally fine. It was basically in, an environment where your humidity is changing very drastically throughout the day. Will that affect your pen and the way that it writes? Specifically like evaporation out of the pen. And the answer is yeah, it's one of the factors. I don't think it's the only factor. But certainly, I mean, you've hit on exactly what I was driving at with that point. If you have a really wet pen, if you have, a specifically wet ink, that absolutely can play a factor. The surface tension, all kinds of things, different properties within that ink. And they can vary quite a bit from one to the other. That's part of what is like the blessing and the curse of using different inks, even within the same brand. I mean, literally every color has different dyes, it has different properties. So really, even from one color to another, it can behave very differently. So that's part of what makes it so wonderful, because you get to test out and experience all these things. And it's also somewhat maddening because you can't always necessarily predict from one ink to the other. But I don't know, keeps the hobby interesting. But good feedback. See here, Different Kind of Geek says, in response to my asking about filling from sample vials, should I show that more? So they said, filling from sample vials as part of a review. Yes, also demos from various mechanisms in general. So that's cool. Okay, I will look to incorporate that more. In fact, spoiler alert, this is going to be the company announcements part, but I did just put out a video on how to fill a piston pen. And I specifically talked about ink samples in there and showed how to do it. So I'm thinking of y'all. I'm going to try to incorporate that just in general into more videos. Even just as I do a pen review, how does it fit into a vial and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep that in mind. So I appreciate the suggestions. It's helping me make better videos. So thank you. And then SC Penna 725 says, would examples of mixing different inks to produce something new be a topic to cover? So I've talked about ink mixing some in the past. It's one of these weird topics that ebb and flow a lot in popularity. Sometimes I get a lot of questions about it. Other times I do it and no one cares. So it's very interesting. I wonder if, right now, economic times are perhaps a bit uncertain. There's a lot going on. Maybe people aren't buying as many pens. They might look at the ink that they have and say, hey, I wonder if I could mix inks. That's a fun way to use what I already have, but not, buy new stuff. That would make a lot of sense to me. So I don't know, it could be interesting. I'll be thinking about that. I love feedback on that. And that actually parlays well into the next question, where I was talking about the Pilot ink cartridges, the mixable parallel ink cartridges. So Miss Marilyn Darling says, one of my favorite things to do is pick the cheapest Pilot and just change out the cartridges in the middle. Don't wash them. Just continue with the next cartridge. So not cleaning the pen in between ink changing. And the ink will start to change gradually from the previous color to the next. Or to put them on an art palette and fill the pen with yellow ink, dip it in a puddle of red, and you'll have orange that fades to red, and then dip it in the blue and it'll fade to purple and green to blue. And it's a somewhat awesome trick if you get it right. This is really cool. This definitely, this starts to get more into like the art and mixed media kind of crowd. Watercolor, like those artists are doing really interesting things like that with fountain pen ink, which is always so cool. There's lots of this on Instagram and TikTok, I'm sure. So yeah, you can definitely do some of that. I will say, not all inks play well together. I think you're okay with Pilot. Like if you're using a Pilot cartridge, but it's bottled inks that, from one brand to another, so different properties. So, you're kind of playing a little bit of roulette by taking random inks and mixing them with other random inks for the first time in your pen. Because if they don't play well together, they could, gel, they could foam up. This is not normal, but it can happen. There are some inks that are wildly different pH and wildly different, properties and stuff like that. In particular, the Noodler's Bay State series are known to be a completely different type of ink than others. So just be aware, if you're mixing within the same brand, same kind of series of ink, you're probably okay. And specifically, if you're looking at inks that are like made to be, mixed together, things like that. So like Jacques Herbin, mixing with them each other, I'm pretty sure would be just fine and stuff like that. So, it's definitely, it pays to, but again, if it's a cheap pen and you're just like, whatever, I don't care, I just want to do cool stuff, then what's the worst case? You lose a cheap pen, or it's harder to clean out or something. So I don't know, the risk is pretty low, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. You don't have to be like super paranoid about it, but I would not take your like Visconti Homo sapiens and try this for the first time, but could be really neat. I think you'd probably be okay just like dipping, like the thing where you talked about dipping, inking it up with like a yellow or a lighter color and then dipping it into darker colors and see what happens. I don't think enough of that ink would be mixing and staying on the nib for it to really be a problem. It would be more like the cartridge thing, putting that into pens that are already inked where you're like maybe playing a little bit more with fate, but I don't know. If you're actively using it and you're writing with it and it mixes out and then you're only left with the ink that's in the pen that you most recently inked up, it's probably less risk of that because it's not like fully mixing, I don't know. It's really interesting. So I thought that was kind of fun. So that is something interesting. Hadn't like heard specifically that technique of like having little palettes. I think like little watercolor palettes where it's just like a little cup kind of a thing. You can put some different colors ink in there and you can dip your nib. That's really interesting. I haven't seen that. Or you could use vials too. So that's really cool. I thought that was neat rather than like mixing larger volumes of ink. Pretty neat. I don't know. I could do more of that kind of stuff. I could show some of that. I'm not like an artist first, but I've used pens a lot and mixing colors is fun. I don't know. I could do some of that. Let me know if y'all want to see that. All right, that's it for feedback right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about some new stuff that we got because we got stuff. All right, first up, we have a new Monteverde MP1 collectible called Honey Yellow. This is going to be $52. It's got a black Yovo number 6 steel nib. You can get an extra fine through stub plus OmniFlex. It's got a piston filler, a locking piston filling mechanism, which is pretty neat. Aluminum cap, aluminum filler knob. So that's kind of cool. And it's got Monteverde's plasma treated feed, which really helps ink flow. And it holds 2 milliliters of ink. So it's a high volume ink thing. Pretty neat. Could be a good pen for your yellow ink holding if you're going to do some of that nib dipping or whatever. So that's kind of cool. We have those now. We should have them for a little bit. I think I don't know if they're regular. I think it might be a special edition. I'm not sure. I'll have to check the website. Another one that we've got, this is an exclusive of ours that we designed with Monteverde. This is an Invincia Deluxe Watermelon Ombre. So this is pretty cool. It's a special edition that we've got. So we'll have it for a little bit, but not forever. This is a teal to pink to green. And it's on the barrel and the cap. Nice transitional color there. It's very cool. It's got silver trim. It's going to be limited. And, same thing. Yovo number 6 nib. Extra fine through OmniFlex. Cartridge converter pen on this one, standard international, converters included. So that one's going to be $88. So go check that out if you're interested. It's pretty cool, very like summery kind of thing. It may not have been an accident that we came out with it at this time. And then we have the featured pen of the day, which I'll show you in more detail later, but we have the TWSBI ECO Matcha, this nice matcha green pen. So it's $32.99 for this pen, which is pretty good deal. I love me some Eco. It is one of my favorite pens. And I have many of them, as you will see in a bit, because I'm going to show you all the other green Ecos that I have and make some ink recommendations. So stick around for the spotlight. But anyway, that pen is, it's a good pen. It's got a number 4 size nib on it. So it's not the biggest nib in the world, but it writes well, especially like the mediums and broads write great. I actually use a fine primarily in mine. It works really well. Seal's really great too if you're not familiar with the Ecos. I feel like I don't have to sell you too hard on the Ecos. It's a great pen. But the green color is pretty cool. It's a nice olive color. And it's a regular edition, so it's not going to be super special or anything like that. But if you just like that matcha green color, go ahead, get it. We also have the Monteverde Axis. Now, this is an interesting pen. It doesn't really look like most other pens. So it's not going to be everybody's vibe, and I totally get that. But it's relatively affordable. It's under $50. It's steel JoWo nib. It's got extra fine, medium, and broad. And it's small. It's a pocket pen. And it's got a magnetic cap, which is pretty cool. One cool thing about it, though, is it does have a magnetic cap, and that we talked about this a couple weeks ago with the automatic watches and all that kind of stuff. It does have a fairly strong magnet, but it's like kind of underneath this like gear-shaped kind of housing that you actually grab. So the magnet, when the pen is closed, is actually not that strong outside the pen. So I think you'll be fine to carry this around in your pocket and stuff like that. It is very interesting, though, because, I mean, I have some right here, and we will, maybe I'll do a feature more on this at another time. But it's magnetic, but then it's also magnetic on the back. It's got a very satisfying kind of click sound, and I don't know, it just fits really nice. Very well machined. The thing that's weird about it is the grip. Like, I can understand where not everybody's going to be into this exact grip, but that's okay. So I'll feature that maybe more next week. But we have those now. If you like pocket pens, that one's really cool. Some great colors, and it's worth checking out. And then last pen that I have to feature today is the Diplomat XO. So if you recall, did an interview a couple months ago with the Diplomat CEO, Matthias, and he showed us these cigar-inspired pens. Now, some pens will say that they are cigar-shaped, which usually means, just kind of a round, relatively straight, maybe tapers a little bit at the end. But this is literally cigar-shaped. I mean, it looks like a cigar. That's the whole point. So that's kind of fun. As a limited edition thing, they're only going to make 265 of these worldwide. So, and it's not like super expensive. I mean, it's a little bit more. It's got a steel nib. I will say that. $348 though. So, it's a lot of money, objectively speaking, for any pen. But for a limited edition kind of thing, it's kind of interesting like this. You can check that one out. And that price one, that one is for the leather one. So there is one that is wrapped in leather, which is really cool. Looks nice. It's not like a super squishy leather. So you feel the leather, but it's, it still feels like a very firm, solid pen. And then there's a lacquered burgundy, which also looks really nice. That one's a little less expensive at $316. So you can get those number 6 JoWo nibs, Diplomat nibs, right? Great. It's got a converter included, standard international converter, which is nice. The pen, you can technically slide the cap onto the back of the thing, but it doesn't hold securely. So I wouldn't post it unless you're going to be very careful about holding your pen upright. So it's really not meant to be posted, but the pen's pretty long. So that's kind of cool. But very interesting pen. I just think it's interesting design. You don't see stuff like this every day. So at least go look at the pictures and check it out. It's pretty cool. All right, and that's it for new stuff that I have right now. I will say there's a lot of stuff coming soon. So check out our website, the new arrivals and coming soon section. You're going to see a lot of interesting things over the next couple of weeks. So let's get into a couple of quick company updates, and then we'll get into questions. All right, well, I don't have a whole lot going on. We were closed earlier this week. I think I mentioned Memorial Day last week. Obviously, very somber day, to celebrate. I personally have some friends that I know. I was in the Corps of Cadets at Virginia Tech, and I have some people that I know that are fallen soldiers, and it's thank you to all of our veterans and their families for your sacrifices for our country. So grateful for that. We had a pretty low key day as a family, and not too much else going on. It's kind of business as usual around here. It's summertime is creeping up. it's starting to come. Pools are open up now, at least here in Virginia. It was a pretty cool weekend that we had overall. So we didn't do any pool action, but now the pools are open. So, we might do something. And then I did get a video out though on how to fill a piston fill. I kind of spoiled it for myself earlier when I was talking, but that was a really good one. It is kind of meant a little more as an introductory video. So if you're a loyal fan here, you're probably going to know most of everything in that video, but still you might pick up on a couple of tips, specifically how to get a maximized filling in your piston pen. So go check it out. It's very instructional. That one's meant to just help new people into the hobby. So that's what that one's all about. And that's it for the moment. So let's get into the questions. Question number 1, Only Hindu 1 says, "Good evening, sir. I am a doctor and I write a lot. I use a fountain pen and have a huge collection of fountain pens. I use blue, black, purple, green, brown, and gray color inks. Lately, I'm looking for water-resistant or waterproof inks. Can you please recommend any? Thank you. Well, I appreciate you writing. You're very courteous in your writing, especially for a comment on the internet. I will say just in general, we have filters on our site which can help you narrow down this. So I'm going to list some colors because you asked for some recommendations. But if you wanted to see all the offerings that we have at any time, if you go to our website and you look at the bottled ink, just hover over ink and you click on bottled ink, or if you just go to view all ink, you can narrow down in the filter by bottled ink, or ink samples if that's what you want to get. But you can check the filter for water resistance. And currently, I just checked on the site, we have 118 results for bottled ink that is water resistant. So, there'll be a couple of sizes of bottles that get duplicated there, but well over 100 colors of ink that you have to choose from, which can be a bit overwhelming. So I will say there are two series of inks that are really, really good at this that I want to highlight. One is the Diamine Forever inks, which I've shown you here on Q&A in the last couple of weeks. That's been going well. We are out of some of those right now because they've sold through, and we're trying to get more. So forgive me if we don't have stock of those in particular that you're looking for, but we're going to restock. There's more coming. And also Diatramentis document inks. They're also really known for being great for that. So those, just look at those and look at their selection if you like what they have going on. But since you asked for colors, I picked 3 inks that I'm going to recommend per color. So yeah, these are just ones that I've had some experience with, or ones that are, I know that are a little more highly regarded. So I don't know what range of color you're looking for, but I kind of try to pick a selection, So I'll start it off with the first one you asked for, which was blues. So I went mostly with some darker blues because those tend to be more the waterproof ones. Just in general, blue dyes that are lighter in color tend to be not water resistant at all. Just whatever it is about blue dye properties. So usually if you have a lighter blue kind of color that has water resistance to it, it often has some other dye component color. It's not like a fully water resistant, but it'll have some darker kind of blue that's in there, and the lighter blue will wash away and the darker will stay. I see that more as a trend, but there are some, there's the document inks or the Forever inks, which I think has a nice blue in there if I remember correctly. But anyway, so I have darker blues. So Noodler's has 54th Massachusetts, very popular, nice blue-black color, very water resistant as well. One that gets kind of overlooked a little bit, this is more of a royal blue, but Namiki blue, which is also the same thing as Pilot blue. If you have a custom 823 or a 743, it's the same ink that comes, different bottle, but same ink that comes with those. It's surprisingly water resistant, as well as they're black too, but the blue one, US Ball Blues. Then the last one I have is Rohrer & Klingner Salix. So this is technically an iron gall ink. It's a modern iron gall, but maybe a little higher maintenance. Not so much, just, you don't want to leave it drying up in your pen, but it is very water resistant. So that's one might be worth a look as well. Black inks, you asked for some of those. There's a bunch. There's a ton of water resistant black inks because just black dye is much more conducive to that. So some that I can just easily recommend, Noodler's has a ton of very permanent black inks. Is really kind of what they're known for. But Noodler's Black is very popular. Noodler's Heart of Darkness also very, very popular. So either of those, they look pretty similar properties. You can go with either of those. Platinum has a pigmented ink called Carbon Black. That is pretty resistant as well. And that one's really good for drying on top of paper. So because of the pigments in it, it's really good if you have paper that is much more heavily sized or a little bit slick. Not like photo paper per se, but if you have really, really sized paper and it's hard to get ink to absorb down into it, but you still want water resistance, Carbon Black would be a really good candidate for that, especially like a Tomoe River type paper. And then the Diamine Forever Raven does really well too. So that one's worth a look as well. Purple inks, you asked for those. Diamine Forever Passion Flower, also good. Noodler's North African Violet, another good one, vibrant purple there. And then Rohrer & Klingner Scabiosa. So this is a little more of a dusty purple, but this is also an iron gall ink, similar to Salix. So Salix and Scabiosa to kind of go hand in hand. And they're kind of fun if you like, an ink that will darken up a little bit over time. For green, we have Diamine Forever Amazonia, kind of a nicer, vibrant green. Platinum Classic Forest Black. Now I know it doesn't sound green because it says black, but it's very green. It's like an olivey kind of forest green. And then Noodler's Zhivago. So that is a super dark green, almost black. But if you want just like this smidge of green, that's a really cool ink. And then you ask for brown. So Diatramentis Document Brown is a pretty easy one. They got a couple different browns. That just one I think is, the one that I like the most. Noodler's Walnut is a really nice color. Very good go-to brown. And then Noodler's Golden Brown as well, if you want a little more of a sepia color. So I try to give you a variety of color options there. And then last but not least, grays. Far and away, my favorite is Noodler's Lexington Gray. That has been a standby for a long time. It's a very nice gray color, great shading, and very water resistant. And then there's not a ton of other water resistant grays actually, but Diatramentis Document Urban Gray and then Document Gray. Both of those are pretty solid, different shades of gray, but they'll be water resistant too. So lots of good options for you. Again, you can check our site and see all the options, but those are ones that I can personally recommend. All right, Marianne Hommel says, as a former book retailer, I had to constantly explain the restrictions we faced by the publisher on pricing, street dates, etc. Could you explain in general what it means to be an authorized retailer for brands? Yes, I can do that. I'm going to try to do this without sounding defensive or without sounding whatever, like I'm on a high horse or anything. But it is something that I have a lot of experience with, and it's something that is really important in the pen industry especially. So yes, to sum it all up, I would say it's really about trust and cooperation. So authorized sellers of pretty much any product will work with their manufacturer to uphold the brand's image. So like the overall image of the brand, that's very powerful in the, whatever business world, marketing, product world. The quality, the price, and the service, right? So you associate different things with either different stores, with different brands of products you might buy. If you buy, a Mercedes-Benz car, you might have different expectations for it than you would for, a Kia or something like that. Not that one is bad, one is good, but there's a different brand positioning, right? So it's up to the authorized retailer to provide all the service and quality and stuff that the manufacturer sets out to do with their brand. In return for that, there's brand that helps to draw you to a particular retailer, but also they're guaranteed to get real products and to get the same benefits of like service, support, and quality from the manufacturer. So they really work together to be kind of like a cohesive brand and product offering and deliver what you would expect as a customer. So it's a lot about the consistency and meeting expectations, if I had to very much generalize and kind of sum it up. So I don't know specifically how it works in all industries. So I'm going to explain a little more detail how it works kind of in the pen industry, at least based on my 15-ish plus years experience. So some manufacturers might sell direct to consumer, but that is kind of tough for most brands to manage, especially if you're a global brand. Because, people are going to have very specific questions. They might need a lot of time, a lot of customer service. They might have, it takes a lot of time to provide good service. Not all manufacturers have those resources. So a lot of times what they do is they want to establish distribution. Also think if you're selling globally, you have to know all the languages, you have to know taxes and all these different rules of things all over the world. That can get very confusing very quickly. So often what larger manufacturers will do is they will set up with a distributor. Maybe they'll start out through a retailer directly, or they may have a couple of layers. So, for example, I'll just use Pilot is a good example because they're a very large company. So Pilot Japan, they're manufacturing, they're doing a lot of different things. Fine writing pens is a very small portion of what they do, but very important part in our world. They have 3, I believe, different distributions set up. They have North America, they have Europe, and then they have Japan directly. And I think they service a bunch from there, all of Asia. So those are different regions. There's different things that they will focus on in terms of, knowing the market, knowing what that more local market likes in terms of their products. Dealing with things like taxes and currency conversions and tariffs and all that kind of stuff. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources, and just like physically shipping the products too. So, a brand like Pilot might be able to just ship product out to their distributor. They're dealing in, container loads on a cargo ship of product, as opposed to onesie, twosie, pen shipments in the tens or hundreds of thousands, at a time. They can just ship like boatloads of stuff to their different regions. And then the distributors will sell stuff from there. So makes it a lot more efficient for manufacturers to be able to focus in that way. And so that's why you have a distribution chain that gets established. Well, it's very important to have an authorized chain of distribution, because the last thing you want to do as a consumer is you go to buy a, Pilot Vanishing Point or whatever, and you get it in and it's not a Pilot Vanishing Point, right? If it's somebody else's pen, that's not good. That's confusing. You may have problems with that pen. And then what are you going to go to Pilot? They're going to get it and be like, this isn't our pen. We didn't make this pen. We can't service this, So, and then it gets, people trash the reputation of it on forums or whatever. And it's not good for the brand to have confusion about what the product is in the marketplace. So what they do is they establish authorized distributors and authorized retailers to sell through, because that is your guarantee as a customer that you're getting the actual product, the thing that they really made, and you're going to get warranty support. You're going to be able to get a direct line of communication and questions. So if you have, this happens a lot of times where a new product is coming out, we need to know information about it, or we need to pass feedback along about something. There's a direct line of communication going back to the manufacturer through their authorized retailers. If it's unauthorized, good luck. It's just kind of the Wild West. So that's an important thing. So manufacturers will have usually regional distributors, and then the distributors will sell to retailers like us. And you might be thinking like, wow, that's a lot of middlemen. But in a high touch industry like fountain pens, these are tools that you have to use. They interact with ink and paper. There's so many variables. I mean, how difficult would it be for Pilot as a manufacturer to know about not only their pens, but all the paper, all the ink, all these other products that they don't actually really have much to do with? How would they be able to provide you that service directly? So they have these distribution channels so that they can focus on what they do. And then the distributors and the retailers can focus on y'all as customers. And then like us, for example, as a store, we know fountain pens. We know all kinds of fountain pens and ink and paper and accessories. And, we're just in that world, and we spend a lot of time with customers on social media. We're like very much boots on the ground in the pen, kind of community. That's time that manufacturers just don't have to be able to do that. So we're able to stay more in touch with you all, have a line of communication back to the manufacturers. So we're getting the real product, the accurate products, all that kind of stuff. We can service you all properly. And then we get that feedback and can pass it on up. If you look at how many like Goulet exclusives we have, that's because we're in touch with you all. We come up with ideas. Manufacturer, if the numbers work out for them, they'll do exclusives, and then we can come up with more stuff for you guys that is interesting and cool that a manufacturer wouldn't really be able to do directly, because, they don't have the nimbleness, I guess, and the being in touch with like hyper localized kind of communities to be able to come up with things like so spot on like that. They need to think a little bit more kind of at scale. So that's an advantage right there. It's more of a kind of an intangible thing. So let's see here. I got off my notes. Manufacturer will have an exclusive relationship with a distributor. And I know in other industries, like the book industry, I'm sure, it's not like one distributor exists. You might have several distributors. And this is the case when you have, more commoditized products, or when you have a much larger, pool of customers. Fountain pen industry is relatively small. You might be talking a few thousand stores in the US at least that might carry fountain pen products. And I'm talking like local bookstores and stuff like that. Online retailers is even narrower than that, who like really specialize in fountain pens. It's just not that many stores. So they will have an authorized agreement with a sole distributor. For Pilot, they have Pilot USA. They've been distributing Pilot. It's sort of it's a separate company. It's sort of a, they're very closely related, but like they both need each other and they're reliant on each other. And that works because then they're both tied to the success or the downfalls of either one. So that works out really well. And in order to actually sell the legit Pilot products, we as a retailer have to reach out to Pilot USA. They have to sort of vet us. We build a relationship. And then we don't have like an exclusive signed agreement with them. So a distributor who is covering an entire region, typically the way it works is they're going to commit to carrying whatever the manufacturer wants to, sell in that region. And so they aren't necessarily picky. They're there to advocate for the brand and service anyone who wants that within that region. Retailers like us, we get to be a lot pickier. We don't necessarily have to pick up any particular product. We can pick and choose and we can fit, depending on what specialty we want to have as a store, we can, make a selection based on whatever it is. And that works out really well because not every retailer can carry everything from every brand. That would just be overwhelming and would mean only the larger businesses with a lot of cash would be able to participate. So the distributor acts sort of as a buffer. So they're really working with the manufacturer and have a close relationship there and do like all the warehousing and storage, which I will say in particular is super helpful right now when there's crazy tariffs and things like that and currency rates are changing and all that kind of stuff, rather than the manufacturer having to deal with that with every single customer or every single retailer. They have one distributor they work that stuff out with. And our distributors, they have inventory, they look at a longer lens and stuff like that. They may absorb some of those tariffs so that prices don't have to immediately go up everywhere. That's happening right now. There are some brands that are raising prices because if they were already sort of at a threshold, where they hadn't raised prices in a while and they, the tariffs kind of put them over, then they may have raised the prices. But it allows for a little bit of breathing room there. So that's why you haven't seen all the prices go jacked up, because there are real costs that are happening. Like basically every brand that we carry has at least that 10%, baseline tariff that is in place right now. So, they help retailers out a lot. Also, a retailer, we were a small mom and pop startup when we started. We had no money, we had no resources. So we really had to kind of scratch and claw our way into it. And what a distributor can do is provide products to a retailer. And if, they build a relationship and they're credit worthy and all that kind of stuff, they can provide 30-day terms or something like that to where the retailer can get the product and then have delayed payment back to the distributor. So that is actually a really important part of a small niche industry like fountain pens because, they're very specific products. They're not always like high volume movers. So it would be much more difficult for any retailer to carry something new with confidence if they didn't have some kind of a buffer there, especially if they're smaller and kind of growing, like we'd been for a long, long time. We're established now and we got cash reserves and stuff, so we can ride those things out a little bit. But that is a really helpful part that is played through like an authorized distribution chain, right? So when you see new products come out from the manufacturer, you will see it available through authorized retailers pretty regularly, pretty consistently. And so it makes it so that when you are shopping, if you're like a loyal pen person, when you're shopping, you can have some confidence that the authorized retailers are going to have whatever the latest thing is. Again, it's not an exclusive agreement. We'll have to carry everything, but there's a pretty good chance, especially if it's something that's popular and in demand, that they're going to have stock of it at the time that it launches, right? And that manufacturer is able to control that through authorized distributorship. Let's see here. So the sale price by law can't be dictated by the manufacturer. That's that term MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price. So that is important because there's a wholesale price that you pay for. I mean, we run businesses. Spoiler alert, we buy products cheaper than we sell them for. I know it sounds crazy, but that's sort of the whole economics of how our business is able to function. So we buy our products, but again, it's not like we're just buying onesie twosies. We're having to buy quantity, right? And there's a lot that goes into it. But anyway, so we often will have pricing on the products with kind of like a set MSRP, right? There's usually some percentage of the MSRP that determines our wholesale cost. So that's important to be established. But again, they don't dictate, either the manufacturer or the distributor cannot dictate what we actually sell something for. That is against the law. So we can sell it at a loss if we want to. We're free to do that. It wouldn't be good business, but we are free to do that. But what we cannot do is, as an authorized retailer, is we cannot sell below their minimum advertised price. It's called MAP pricing. This is why you will often see a lot of pens sold at the same price most everywhere that you look. Some people may sell it at full MSRP, but usually there's a certain percentage of discount that is allowed to be advertised that you'll see pretty consistently across the internet. And that's a really good thing, actually, because what that means is that, especially in today's very strongly algorithmically driven world, either on third-party marketplaces like Amazon or in places like where there's ads like Google ads and Google Shopping and things like that, you could have, if it was the Wild West and there was no minimum advertised price at all, you could have one rogue retailer that goes out and lists something at a rock bottom price. It doesn't make any sense. They may not even have stock of it. They may be advertising this thing and not even be able to fulfill any orders, and what that would do is that would then tank everybody else's price too, especially in a marketplace like Amazon where, it's usually like calculated based on what other people are doing. It kind of like, it's complicated. I don't sell on Amazon, so I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I know enough people who do, where that can really wreck some things and undermine the value of the brand as a whole, So if you're seeing prices go up and down and all over the place, and then, you see some sellers are selling it super, super below everybody else, and then that becomes in your mind like, well, that's the price that it's actually worth, and everybody else is charging a premium. That's usually not the case, honestly. I don't know if you know this, but we're not like, I'm not driving a Lamborghini here. It's like, it's a very modest business that we run in the fountain pen world. It's really a labor of love as much as anything else. So when there's, people going rogue and selling way below MAP pricing, it ends up kind of undermining the brand value as a whole and kind of wrecks it for most of the other retailers too. And I get it. Like, I'm a consumer just like everybody else, so it's like, you always want to pay the best price that you absolutely can. But there's like a very fine line between like, yeah, but I want to get the best price, but I also want good service. I also want all these things, So it's like, you can't have everything, right? Isn't there that old adage that's like, there's three things, there's a triangle. You get quality, price, and service. And you can get two out of the three, but one of them has to come at a sacrifice, So, usually, and every retailer really can kind of decide what they want. We try to do as much of all of it as we can, but we would rather sacrifice price than quality or service. Personally, that's just how we run our business. So we try to provide the best price we can, but that's why we don't do like price matching and stuff like that. It's like we're providing the best value we can, and then we don't want to sacrifice anything else. So we gotta sell for what we gotta sell for. Anyway, so. Let's see here. We talked about MAP pricing. I talked about it's a concern online, again, because when you're selling the same stuff that everybody else is, it ends up being like, a race to the bottom pretty much. So for the manufacturer to set a floor for that is really helpful. Especially because for the relatively low barrier to entry that is online retail in any industry these days, it would be very quick and easy for someone to get into that game, drive all the prices down, lose a ton of money trying to build their business. They get out of the game, and then who's really won? Maybe you bought some cheap products in the meantime, but there's going to be constant churn. All the established retailers are going to not be able to sell the product. Then they're going to drop out. They're not going to sell it anymore if they can't make any money on it. And then the manufacturer is in a tight spot, and then they stop innovating. And it's like a long-term view versus short-term view kind of thing. So there's this delicate balance between providing, good value, good products and stuff like that, and trying to get a good deal. You know what I mean? So let's see here. What else did I have? Authorized retailers are guaranteed to get the real product. They get warranty support from the manufacturer and distributor. They have direct communication about product information, especially new products coming out. Chain of feedback is really good, especially in a smaller industry like ours. The relationship that we have with our distributors and with our manufacturers is super crucial, especially with pens with nibs, and there's really fine detail in a lot of these products. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So QCing and getting feedback is no small part of that. I won't say any specific brand or anything, but I will say that I spent no less than, let's see here, it's like late Wednesday afternoon right now. I've spent no less than 8 hours of my week so far on a particular quality issue that we discovered it's on a new product that y'all don't know about yet. But we ran into a thing, and we are working it out with the manufacturer as an unforeseen thing, and so we're working that out. And that kind of thing happens more often than you would think. And we do that because if we didn't, then y'all might have a product that goes out to you that doesn't meet your expectations. So there's a very important relationship there that takes a while to establish between manufacturers and retailers that ultimately helps you as a customer in the long term to get you a better product. But that takes time, which takes money, because people don't work for free. Let's see here. Dates and announcements. I think, you were maybe alluding to this with street dates. I don't know what that term, that might be a book specific term, Marion, but, launch dates, I guess for us would matter. It's like, it's a kind of thing that if like, there's going to be a global launch on a particular product, the manufacturer wants to, promote it. They've got special, events, or they've got a special marketing campaign or whatever that they're trying to do. But if some road person jumps in there and blows the news early and starts selling it out from anybody else, that can really mess up the plan for the manufacturer. And they spend a lot of time and intentionality trying to brand position different products, trying to get stuff for you all. And that can get ruined by people going totally rogue. So, manufacturers will, again, that's part of representing the brand well, is we agree to, not make something public until they say, and stuff like that. We do get to find out about products ahead of times, many times, but we often have to keep it a secret because we got to respect the brand's wishes. So that's an important thing. And then just about like unauthorized retailers, that you buy, and it's like, there's not always like a badge or something like that. I will say we're authorized retailers for every brand that we carry that has any like authorization type process. There's some like accessories and stuff that we buy that aren't like formally, distributed in such a way. Not like pens and ink and stuff like that are. But we're authorized retailers for everything we carry. And because I think that's important. So if you're buying from anybody that's not an authorized retailers, there's not, you lose a lot of the guarantees. You might be getting a legit product, hopefully. But you may not. You may be getting a counterfeit product. You may be getting something that was, not to name a specific brand, but I've heard of some, kind of gray market sales, which are like, gray market is basically when it's outside of traditional distribution. So if there's like a region, like say we're in the US, right? But there's somebody overseas that's selling on Amazon or whatever, or selling or eBay or something like that. They're selling the product in the US that is branded as the same product, but it's not through the official distribution chain. So you as a consumer are like, oh, I'm getting the thing, I'm just getting it at a good deal. Well, I know specifically of one instance of that happen. I don't know if it's still happening. It might be, but in the pen world, where it was actually like somebody was taking like subpar parts, so kind of taking the defect parts out of parts bins. And they either like had somebody that they knew at the facility, or they were getting it out of the trash or something. And they were assembling pens from parts basically, and then selling them as the real thing. So, in a picture, it might look real, but then, you get it and the thing doesn't function the same, or it's got all kinds of defects and stuff, but if they present it as the real thing, then, you get that pen and you're like, oh, this stinks. And then you go to, whatever the brand's, warranty service or something like that is. And you're like, I bought this pen and it's not right. And they're like, that's not a real pen. They're like, that's not a pen that we put out there. And then you're up a creek. So, that's just one instance. I'm not saying like that kind of stuff happens all day, every day, but there's a reason for these authorized distribution channels. It's so that you're getting the right product and you're getting what you expect and it's serviced properly. So I will say, you know, particularly with Amazon and maybe other marketplaces, but I know with Amazon specifically, if a retailer is using their fulfillment by Amazon services, so it's Amazon stocks it in their warehouse and ships it out, which costs a pretty hefty fee to do that. But for any retailer that does that, even if you're an authorized retailer, the problem is Amazon commingles their stock. So I would buy my stock legitimately, send it to Amazon. Amazon would take that, put it on a shelf somewhere, and then it would have the same SKU as something that somebody else sent them. Well, they're pulling from that, you know. So I actually don't have any idea what you're getting. So I'm the retailer. I'm having them do my fulfillment, but somebody else who's got a counterfeit good or something totally garbage or made up or whatever, a bunch of returned products that they're selling as new, they send that to Amazon. Amazon doesn't know the difference. So they just ship it and sell it out. So you might actually get some bum product that somebody else put in their fulfillment center that I've sold to you as an authorized seller. That's bad. That's bad that Amazon does that for this reason, which is why you don't see a lot of fountain pen, like legit, especially like higher end fountain pens available on Amazon, because it's so difficult to actually maintain the service and quality that most pen manufacturers want. So you will see some products on there, but most of the time you're going to see it from overseas sellers trying to sell essentially gray market and trying to undercut, you know, whatever the local market is in that way. And, you know, you don't really know who's behind it necessarily. But that is just one thing just to be aware of, that is kind of how that's set up. You know, unauthorized retailers, you know, they don't, since they're not getting the product, they're not accountable to anyone in the official distribution chain. The pricing can be all over the place. The information that they have about the product can be all over the place, you know, and it can really confuse and undermine the brand. You know, if somebody goes out there and sells a bunch of bum products under one particular brand, then people get it and they're not quite aware that they're not getting the real thing. And then they post on forums and post everywhere like, I've had this terrible experience. Well, now it's like hurting the brand when they didn't even do anything wrong, you know, so that's bad. And then there's no accountability to properly like advertise, support, deliver the product or service they sell. And I'm not saying unauthorized sellers always do this, but there's just no guarantee. So I'm a buyer too. I buy all kinds of different products. I know that if I'm buying something from some random place and I don't really know them very well, and the price seems way better than everybody else's, I would be taking a gamble. Now, because I work in this industry, I'm rarely buying from a place like that because I know that that's probably not the way it should go, and it's not good long-term for the brand. So if it's anything that like I care about that matters, not a total commodity, then I will try to buy through like an official authorized chain of distributorship, because there's a reason why that's there. So anyway, hopefully that works for you all. A bit in the weeds, bit inside baseball. Again, I know it's got kind of a defensive negative tone a little bit. I really didn't intend it necessarily for it to be that way. But again, the thing is really all about trust. And it's like Wild West, especially if you're buying on the internet. You just don't always know what you're actually getting or who you're buying it from. So that's why it's so important. And like, I'm biased in this way because we've spent so much time on the Goulet brand, right? And we spend a ton of time with our manufacturers and distributors to make sure you're getting the best possible product. You know, so we take a lot of pride in that. We spend a lot of time doing that. So of course I'm biased a little bit in that way. But I just want you to know, like, that is some of where your money is going when you buy these products from an authorized seller. It's not just you're getting a premium for the product, but you're getting all those other intangibles and long-term research and development for new products. You're getting, you know, all these things cost money, and you're getting videos like these. Like, you don't have to pay anything for the 15 years of videos we put out. We do all that because, you know, we make money on the products we sell, and thank goodness, at least so far, and hopefully for the foreseeable future, we will continue to be able to do that and just fund it ourselves, that we don't have to do sponsorships and ads and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah, now you know a little bit more, hopefully. All right, let's totally shift of gears into the next question, shall we? This question is from Elborn B. Says, is it possible to change the Sailor TUZU nib? I've got a fine, and I would prefer something a little wider and smoother. So the long and short of it is no. Sorry to just come out of the go. So practically no. Technically, yes, you can swap the nibs. I've got a couple pens here I'm going to show you. The Sailor TUZU, you know, if you're not familiar with the pen, it's Sailor's introductory level pen. We have it for $40, and I believe it's still $40. Sailor's one of those brands that just did some price increases. And let me make sure that I am up to speed on that, actually. But basically, it's their kind of intro level pen. They developed it specifically to be like an intro pen. Let me just double check. Yep, $39.50. Okay, so we've got that. It comes with a converter. It's a pretty good pen for the value. So, but it's unique. It's got a pen. It's got a nib that looks somewhat familiar. You know, it's a winged nib that kind of wraps around in the feed and it kind of slides on there. Looks, you know, similar enough to Lamy, and like Platinum's got some nibs like that. You know, they're not alone in doing that. It's a very economical way to make a nib, but it's proprietary. This is a different nib. They developed it specifically for the TUZU Adjust, and it's not the same even as other Pilot pens. Sailor. It is different from Pilot pens too, but it's different from other Sailor pens. So other pens like the Compass and things like that they've had as introductory pens in this kind of similar price range has a totally different nib. So what that means is you are committed to using Sailor TUZU nibs. In addition to that, they don't sell TUZU nibs separately. So a brand like Lamy does offer their nibs separately. So you can buy a spare nib, swap it out. Cool. It's a nice to have whenever a brand does that, but it's not always a given. Now I will say, you know, this one is not as easy to slide off. I don't actually know that I've tried to slide it off the feed before, but I'm sure it can be done. But the nice thing about this is you can pull the nib and the feed out relatively easily from the pen. It's smooth in there, so you actually, you know, don't have to, well, I'm sorry. It is smooth in there, relatively speaking, but it does have one particular slot that it needs to slide in and won't actually drop down in place unless you have it aligned. And that's to help with because the whole thing with this pen is you can adjust the grip, and the triangularness of the grip can change based on the thing. So you can kind of rotate the angle of the nib if you want. So it's not easy to put it in the wrong way, and it kind of locks in. It's friction fit. So it's relatively easy to pull this out and swap it. But they do not sell either like the feed and nib together or just the nib itself. They don't sell it separately. Let me see if I can just get this thing off of here. It's on there pretty good. I mean, what the heck? This is my personal pen, so if I break it on camera, then that's my fault. All right. Trying to grab the wings and sort of rotate it out. I'm pulling on it, and it's pretty well stuck. So I would say even if they did offer it separately, it would be a bear to get this off of there. I would keep going, but I don't want to embarrass myself anymore on video. You know, they could sell like the feed and the nib together, but they're not doing that. So yes, technically it's possible. So, you know, I've got, what size do I have on here? I have a fine on here, and on this other one, I have a medium. So if I wanted my medium to be on my mint green here instead of the black, I can relatively easily pull my nib and feed out, and I can swap it between the two, set it in place, it drops in, boom. Now I have a medium nib. So I can do that, but you have to have two TUZU pens to do it. So there's the answer. Technically, yes, you can do it, but is it practical? I mean, not really. You have to buy a second pen, basically. But you might be able to get one used, or maybe if somebody has, you know, somebody has one that's the body's damaged or something like that, and you can pick it up cheaper on, you know, eBay, or maybe you see it on somebody's Instagram or something like that. You know, you can reach out and find it, but it's a $40 pen. So, you know, you might get a little bit of a deal, but how much hassle is it worth? I would say the other option too, it's not really an option in your situation, but would be to get a Nibmeister to do a custom grind on it. It's really hard to go up in nib size though, because you have the tipping, it's a certain amount of material on here. You can't really make it bigger. You can kind of only take it away because you basically have to grind it to get it. So If you have a nib size that's too big and you want it to be smaller, you could get it custom ground, but you can't really go up in size. You would have to add material on, and that's not really possible. Also, what you would end up paying for that would probably be as much as a new pen. So pretty much that's going to be your best option. So hopefully that's helpful to you. I know it's not like probably the answer you want to hear necessarily, but I will say, depending on where and when you bought it, you might be able to reach out to the retailer. If it's us, let us know. If it's been, relatively soon, but if you use the pen, you may not be able to get everything back you paid for it. But that may be an option for you if it's a relatively recent purchase. You might be able to exchange it if you didn't like the nib size. I know we'll work with you. Maybe not every retailer would do that per se with an inked pen, but that is also an option. You can at least ask about it. And I will say the TUZU Adjusts are relatively stingy pens. So it's definitely better to go on the broader size. Even the broad nib is not like an absolute gusher. It tends to still be a bit on the stingy side. So it's just a thing with these pens. They're not gushers. So if you haven't bought one yet and you're interested, go the size up from where you think you might want to go, and you'll probably be in a good place. All right. Next question I've got. Mixed Drinks 8100 says, speaking of the TWSBI Mini, where is the TWSBI Vac Mini? I don't know who's speaking of the TWSBI Mini. Were we talking about that before? I don't know. Anyway, where is the TWSBI Vac Mini? It is gone everywhere. Not even the special ones, just a regular one. Where are they? So I was like, we still carry them. But I looked on our site and I was like, yep, we're out of stock of both of them. There's a clear one and there's a smoke one. That's it. And we don't have either of them right now. I will say it's something I looked at our stock and stuff like that. They're not high volume pens to begin with. So I will say that it's not like we had gobs and gobs of them. We have a lot of different products. We try to run, our business in a, relatively lean way that we can. So if we have a pen that's not a high velocity seller, we don't keep as many of them on hand, which is fine. And it's our job to manage that and make sure that we have them in stock when you want them, but that we're not just having tons and tons and tons of stuff sitting on our shelves that is just doing nothing, and then we're cash poor. So that's our job to manage that as a business. But if you're looking around and you're seeing it's not on our site, it's not on anyone else's site, something's up with that. That means that the supply is not there at the distributor, which in this case, TWSBI is the manufacturer. They also retail some directly, and they're a distributor. So they kind of serve in multiple ways. But we buy our stuff through TWSBI. And I didn't look into like all the dirty details of this one because I'm sure it's, I may not find all the details, but I do know that in the last couple of months, there's been just a hint of disruption in the supply chain, specifically in the region of Taiwan and China to the US. So not sure if you heard about that on the news. So again, I don't know if directly that is, impacted by that, but I would imagine, even if it's not like a pricing issue, I would have to imagine that with all the disruption that happened, especially with, because like a lot of the shipping lanes, they're shipping product on cargo ships a lot from the China to US. And that's the same lanes that Taiwan, Japan, all that are coming from. So wouldn't surprise me to learn that there would be supply disruptions with, any brand that's coming out of Japan, China, Taiwan. So I suspect that's probably what's going on. My guess is that probably those pens are not, the Vac Minis are not super high volume sellers to begin with. Most retailers like us probably didn't have a lot of them on hand. TWSBI themselves in the US may not have had a lot of them on hand because they may not be high volume sellers for them, or it just may have happened to hit a cycle where they were, relatively low on their inventory and they were going to ship more over. And then all this stuff went down and it got disrupted. So my assumption is that this is a temporary thing. I don't think it's like getting discontinued, or I haven't heard anything about that. I think it's been a disruption in the supply chain, and you're seeing stock running out because of all the tariffs and all the things that people have been, yelling about. Not even necessarily, I mean, I don't know if pricing was a part of this issue. I don't have specific knowledge of any of that, but I imagine it has to be a factor. But I think probably more of it has to do with just how much the shipping distribution chain, the shipping lanes, that whole thing got disrupted in the last, 4 to 6 weeks. It probably has had an impact on that. So, yeah, that's my assumption. I don't know that specifically. I don't have specific knowledge of any of that, but that's what I wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, just hang on. I'm sure it'll come back in stock at some point. And then once you see it come back in stock at one retailer, you'll probably see it at a whole bunch of others. Cause once TWSBI gets a shipment in, they'll ship everybody's back orders and then you'll see it pop up kind of everywhere. So best thing to do is if you are interested, sign up for email notification on our site, ideally, not others. Wherever you want to buy the pen. If they have email notification, sign up for email notification. Then when it does go back in stock, you'll be notified right away. That's the best thing. All right. Next question and last question. This actually is a personal question. So I put it at the end in case you're like, I don't care about Brian. I just want to get his pen knowledge in my brain. I will not be offended by that at all. But I've mentioned I'm taking drum lessons and, I love music. I love saxophone. I love all these different things. I play a lot of instruments, but drums has been my more recent thing. So the question from HLN Marie said, what drummers do you like? I will say I'm still sort of a noob when it comes to drumming. So do not have what do they call it? There's a specific name for it. It's called like expert bias or something like that. Just because I know a lot about pens doesn't mean I know a lot about drums or anything else for that matter. So disassociate yourself a little bit from my, whatever. I would not necessarily call myself a self-proclaimed expert on anything, but for whatever authority you think I have in the fountain pen world, do not apply that to drums. This is a personal thing. But anyway, I am a person who's talking into a camera who's interested in drums, and you asked the question. So I will give you my opinion. So if any of you are, I've only been drumming for a few months. So, but I've been into music my whole life. I've looked up to different bands and different drummers and stuff. So I'm vaguely aware, but I haven't really taken anybody seriously until somewhat recently. So I will share with you who are the drummers that I have looked at, but I'm still very open to learning about more drummers. So if you are a drummer or you like people who drum, let me know. So I have some that I definitely like. Jorge Garrido, he's also known as El Estepario Siberiano. He's a Spanish drummer, very popular on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. I watch a lot of his YouTube stuff. He's a phenomenal drummer, and he's a really good content creator too, very entertaining. He's really cool. He's a bit raw. He's got a bit of a mouth. But I really respect him as a drummer and as a content creator, honestly. He's got a pretty cool story as well, if you learn. But he's really cool. I really like the drummers who are like very musical. The ones who like really know their craft. Because again, most of my musical background is in, concert band and marching band and things like that. So that's, a little more formal instruction, reading music, that kind of thing. So I do really respect like complex rhythms and time signatures and stuff. And with drumming, it gets really crazy in terms of changing time signatures and using all your limbs in different ways. It can get very, very complex and very, the more I learn about drumming and the more I try doing it, when I watch other drummers, I'm like, oh my gosh, how are they doing this? Apart from just like watching it from afar and being like, oh, wow, that looks really impressive, or that's loud, or they're moving a lot. Once I actually understand what they're doing with their different hands and how they're achieving some of these things, I'm like, oh my gosh. Especially when you get into like polyrhythms, like you have one rhythm you're keeping in one hand and a different rhythm you're keeping in another one. Wow. And there's more of that can happen on drumming than it can, on like bass guitar or something. So I specifically set that up because Danny Carey, he's the drummer for Tool, very much known. Tool is known as like the musician's band. All their music is very complex. It's hard to like head bob to because ever evolving time signatures and things like that. But Danny Carey stuff, his drum setup is just wild. He has so much stuff. It's crazy. But I really respect him. There's a band called Sleep Token. And the drummer's name is Tu. They're like kind of characters within this lore. Phenomenal drummer. Really cool too, because he also incorporates some electronics into it. So he's got like a drum pad. And so he's like live performance doing a lot of crazy stuff, just like Danny Carey with like time signatures and polyrhythms. But he's doing a lot of that, and he's like incorporating like electronics into it too. So it's very like a kind of a blend of like rock and EDM, but very cool. For a while there, they didn't know who it was. That was kind of their whole shtick, is like they were anonymous, and you didn't know who they were. But I Googled it, and it's like, oh, Adam Petter. I don't know anything about him. I've just seen some videos of them playing and listening to their music, and it's pretty wild. So that's kind of cool. Larnell Lewis from Snarky Puppy, among other things. Phenomenal drummer, great gospel drummer too. His stuff is really cool. In fact, a very popular viral video is one of him listening. It's a Drumeo video of Larnell Lewis, and he is listening to Metallica's Enter Sandman for the first time. He gets to listen to it once, and then he has to try to play it back. It's pretty wild. And he does a surprisingly good job. Great guy, really talented. And so, yeah, really love what he does too. And actually, Snarky Puppy is interesting because Rachel actually went to school with one of the members of Snarky Puppy. So that's kind of cool. They were in like show choir together. Isn't that fun? Anyway, another phenomenal drummer, very different genre. The band called Lorna Shore. It's known as deathcore. Not everybody's vibe. Lots of guttural screaming and golem screams and pig squealing noises. It's very fascinating in its own art form. But the drummer there, his name is Austin Archie. And holy crap, if you want like fast, double bass pedal, fast, blast drumming, blast beats, boy, he is so good, so tight and so consistent. And he also looks like he's like half asleep. Like he looks like he's barely making any effort. It's pretty phenomenal. Look up Austin Archie, and his drumming is phenomenal. Another good one, Questlove from The Roots. You've probably seen him on The Roots on Jimmy Fallon. But he's a phenomenal drummer as well. Done a lot of other things besides the Jimmy Fallon stuff, but he's great personality as well. Another one who does a lot of really complex stuff and has a huge kit is Mike Portnoy. He was with Dream Theater for a long time. He's doing his own stuff now, but he's an interesting character as well. But his Dream Theater days, he did some very complex drumming stuff. And Dream Theater is another one of those bands. It's kind of like Tool, a little bit different vibe, a little more like operatic, kind of like power metal-y, but still like wildly complex and difficult to play. Of course, I have to mention John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, kind of iconic in like the rock drumming world. And then this one I didn't know like specifically who the drummer was, but I love Boston and their album Boston, particularly the song Smokin'. It's like one of my favorites. So Sib Hashian was the drummer on that album. So I don't know that much about him specifically as a drummer, but I do love to drum along to Boston because, very upbeat, very interesting and very dynamic drumming on that. It's not just the same beat over and over again. There's a lot of like offbeat kind of, cymbal crashes and things like that are, that make it really fun and interesting. So there's a whole bunch of other ones, but those are some of the ones that I thought of and that I've like maybe followed a little bit and just like their music. So yeah, those are my drummers. And I would love to hear if y'all have any more, if you want to like link to different YouTube videos and stuff. That'd be kind of fun too. All right, let's do the pen spotlight, shall we? All right, so the pen I want to spotlight for you is the TWSBI ECO Matcha. And as I was looking in my ever-growing TWSBI ECO collection, I found that I have a few Eco greens. Now, there's a couple of Eco teas in here, but they're all in the Eco family. And I was like, wow, dang, they really have a lot. So I thought, while I'm highlighting the pen that you're probably already familiar with, I'll talk a little bit about the pen itself. This is the Matcha. Nice looking pen. I will say some of the stock images that we saw, we took our own, they're on our website. But the ones that we saw beforehand, this material looked a lot lighter. So this is more of a true matcha olive color. It looks almost like a brighter green in some of the stock images. It just depends on kind of how it's photographed. But, you know, in real life, I can vouch that it is a pretty true matcha color, which I think looks really nice. And actually it looks pretty decent with the red too, you know, contrasting a little bit. But, you know, the red logo doesn't always go great with every color, but I think it kind of looks okay on this one. Eco, great pen, you know, piston filler, big ink capacity, comes with a tool to be able to disassemble it too, which I think is great if you are a tinkerer and you want to get a pen that you want to tinker with, but it's not a huge investment. You don't necessarily have to worry about breaking it too much or whatever. Got videos on how to disassemble it and stuff. Eco is a great pen for that. Yeah. And then really, really good sealing cap. So I actually consistently have an Eco with Emerald of Chavor, which is a shimmer ink, loaded up at all times. I use it for, you know, like my journal that I keep at home. I just keep it with that all the time. And when it gets empty, I fill it back up. But I mean, months it'll go without drying out. So that's cool. Big fan of the pen. Anyway, what makes this one special is the color. So this is going to be a regular edition, so it'll be around for a bit. Some of these other ones, though, I think most of these other ones are going to be previous special editions. So I thought it might be good just to show you this one next to some other greens. Maybe it'll be helpful, maybe not, because most of these we don't have on our website anymore. But we do have a lot of these on our special edition, TWSBI ECO Special Edition blog post, which is a helpful reference, even for me. Definitely looked at that while I was putting these together. Excuse me. And then after I go through all these, I will tell you what inks I think pair well with it. So first one I have here, this is the Eco Amazonite. This was from 2024, relatively recent one. First one that had like a swirl pattern to it. So that's kind of nice. I think it looks really good. Totally different green, got a lot of blue in it. But that's that comparison. This is the Irish green with black onyx trim. Very different vibe, but I think it still looks really nice. This one was a little more expensive. This is like $50 because of the trim. But you can see the matcha is a lot lighter than that. This one here is the Persian green from 2023. Definitely a lot more blue in it than this one. It's got a lot of yellow in the matcha. Obviously, it's like an olive color. This one is the Eco T Royal Jade. So the difference between the Eco and the Eco T is regular Eco has a hexagonal cap. Eco T has sort of a rounded triangle cap. Does that make a huge difference? Not really, but it is a difference. And then same thing on the finial here, the piston knob, hexagonal and then triangular. That's it. Everything else is the same, nibs, body, all that's the same. This one in particular, though, this was another kind of premium one, like the Irish green. This one has rose gold trim, and it's got the metallic little finial there. So that's a nice looking one, much brighter, more vibrant green. This one is one of the ones that looks closer a bit in color. This is the Glow Green from 2022. And so this one's a little bit translucent, not quite as much yellow, but somewhat close. So if you like that one, I want something similar. Not a bad one to look at. This is the Jade. This is from 2021. So Jade, definitely a lighter color, but there it is. Very different looking green on this one. This is the transparent green from 2018. You know, obviously a much more vibrant green and it's translucent. Then this is another Eco T here. This is the yellow green from 2018. Again, triangularness happening. So this one, you can say, okay, the matcha is definitely a yellow or a green, but it's not this yellow. This is really like almost more yellow than green, but gives us a good baseline for kind of where this one falls. And then the last one I have, this is lime green. This one goes back to 2016. Very vibrant in color. You know, a lot more yellow on this one too. More of a neon kind of thing going on. But there you go. So that is my whole TWSBI Eco green lineup. I have a shockingly high number of TWSBI Ecos because basically at this point, everyone that comes out, I get it. Because once you start collecting them, then you just got to get all of them, right? So, ink to match the matcha. I think there's a couple of good ones. There's definitely like a lot that are in the olive family. A lot of them tend to be in the darker side, which you can certainly go with, but ones that I thought were like a little closer, a little truer to this color. I got 3 of them. I have Rowan Klingner Alt Gold Grün, which is going to be a little vibrant, maybe a little bit more yellow, but really nice color. It shades tremendously well. So that's a cool ink. The Pilot Iroshizuku Chiku Rin. That one is, again, maybe a little bit brighter than this one, but still fairly close. And then I think the one that's actually probably the closest in color is the Jacques Herbin Vert Olive. Very nice ink, well behaved, also shades really nicely. Could be a really good match for this. So there you go. That is our Eco Matcha. We have it available at Goulet pens now and for the foreseeable future. So if you're interested, you can go pick it up. Extra fine, fine, medium, broad, I believe. We don't have a 1.1 for that, do we? Let me double check. I should know this off the top of my head. Shame on me. It's hard to keep all this in your head. For every brand, everything and stuff changes. Okay, extra fine, fine, medium, broad, and 1.1 stub. So you can really get whatever you like. I like the fine for all around, just note taking and stuff. I love the broad. It's wet for like shading inks and shimmers and sheeners. Great for that. And the 1.1 is nice too, if you want to mix up your brightening a little bit. So all decent, but pick whichever one you like. And yeah, that is the matcha. So that's what I got for you here. Let's get into my adventures and then we'll wrap this thing up. All right. Brian's adventures. Well, nothing too crazy going on right now. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we'll wrap it up. We had a 3-day weekend, which, when you have stuff, your life is busy. You have things like, for me, it's my garage, right? I go through my garage. I don't spend a lot of time in there, but, I have a workbench and stuff. I just throw things on there. I don't really have an organization system for it yet. I've sort of got places for some things, but then I get all this new weird stuff in there and there's kids' toys and it's a hodgepodge of different stuff in there. The doors open a lot, leaves blow in, frogs jump in there. It's kind of a mess and it just builds up over time. And like every time I go through my garage, I'm like, gosh, I really need to clean this thing up. I'm like, if I just had a day, like an extra day with nothing, that's what I should do is clean the garage. So I had a surprisingly low commitment weekend this weekend. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to clean my garage. Now I did, but I was physically exhausted and only got about halfway clean of what I wanted to do. So I may have to get excited about doing it again this weekend. But anyway, it was just nice to just have something, it's like whenever I have some time, it's like, again, I've got a lot going on and I get to do enjoyable things. I get to, do music and I get to, I have a good time with my kids and stuff like that. But, stuff that's like, I really want to get that thing done, random stuff. And that's how you're like full on adult mode is when like the things that you're excited to do in your downtime is just other chores that you've been meaning to get to. Like you genuinely get excited about that. I'm like, yeah, this is the life stage I'm in. So anyway, it felt good to at least get that going. It's not where I want it to be yet, but there's some momentum now. So maybe I'll keep that going. So I did that, did some more drumming. I had my drum lesson this weekend and we focused on 6/8 time signatures. So I got a lot of different drills, a lot of different techniques for doing some 6/8 timing. And that's a lot of fun. Rachel and I are both suckers for a good rock song with a 6/8 time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you would know it if you hear it. It's got more of a waltz kind of feel, like a, kind of groups of threes. But rock in particular it's got a good vibe in that 6/8. Anyway, so did some of that. I do cycling. I haven't done quite as much recently, but I am trying to get out there now that the weather's like getting really nice. So I've clocked a lot of miles on my bike. Since I got my bike I'm currently riding, I've probably put 4,000 to 5,000 miles on that bike. And so I got to the point where I basically worn down like the front chain ring. So I needed to get a new chain ring. I got one slightly bigger, with more teeth on it because I want more top end. Because I'm a big guy and I got a lot of power, so I can ride pretty fast when I want to. Can't always keep it up for long, but I can do it. So I got a slightly bigger chain ring, and then went ahead and upgraded the chain as well. So I got a buddy of mine. Everybody needs a buddy like this in their life, somebody that like like I'm pretty nerdy with my stuff. I really get into and like fountain pens, yeah, and other things too. I get pretty well into it, but it's rare that I find somebody that like gets even more into it than I do. But that is this friend. He's the kind of friend that like, if you need to know what kind of refrigerator to buy or washing machine, or if you need to know if a Burr coffee grinder is better than a whatever the other type is, this guy will know all the details of that and have researched it and read 3 articles about it already. And so it's like a human AI that you can just ask for this type of things. But he's also a really nice guy. So he's a gear junkie like I am. And so got together with him. We worked on my bike together and then did a ride. That was really fun. So to get to do that. And then also I had this interesting experience. Rachel and I basically skipped our 20s. Like, we didn't really like socialize a whole lot. We got married right out of school. We're working a lot. I was working with my dad trying to build his business. I was making pens on the side. Rachel was working crazy hours at her job. We were just trying to get life going. And we're both not super duper like social creatures anyway. So we really just didn't go out a lot, really. Didn't travel a whole ton. We were just working. Had kids young, started the business, and we just been pretty busy with that for like, 15 years, and then some. So it's pretty rare that I just like get together with people socially. But I had a friend of mine invited me to go to like it's a venue that's like I guess it's a bar, but it's not like a bar. They have a lot of pool tables. They've got a big stage with a huge dance floor and venues, and they had a live band that was there that they brought in from Nashville. That was pretty good. So just got together with a friend, and it was like $8 for an hour and a half of pool. And so I just played pool with 3 other guys, and I was like, this is like, what do we need? I was like, well, I'm having fun, but I'm like, this is weird. You just stand around on like a Friday night and talk and hang out. Like, most of the time when I'm getting together, it's like with my other buddy, like, oh, let's fix my bike and, whatever. Let's do a landscaping project together, or let's go solve this thing or fix or build this thing. That's most of my social interactions. So I don't know. I just kind of make that fun little observation. It's one of those things that's like, it's not weird at all. It's actually what most people do. But I so seldom have these things where I'm like, oh, I'm just going there literally just to hang out and socialize with these people. So it was fun. I mean, I definitely embraced it. And then I went home the next day and did a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway, that was kind of fun. But it was neat. I also hadn't played pool in a while. So I did okay. And then last thing, our kids are ending the school year. That'll be fun. Got exam week and it's bananas because they've got crazy schedules and stuff like that. But soon enough, they'll be at home complaining about how bored they are because it's summer and they don't get to see their friends as much and all that kind of stuff. But it'll be good. I got great kids, and Rachel and I will figure out what to do with them. We'll put them to work. All right. I want to thank you for watching. Leave me some feedback. Continue to ask me questions. I'd love to answer more of them for you. Check out gouletpens.com for ink and paper and all that kind of stuff. My fun fact for this week, I was really kind of curious. I was like, where did the modern drum set come from? Like, where did it originate? I was vaguely familiar with some of it, but I researched it a little bit more, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So the modern drum set's a mixture of different percussion instruments that all came together in the jazz and vaudeville scenes in the early 1900s in cities like New Orleans. New Orleans is often attributed to kind of the birth of the drum set. We owe recognition of several different ethnic groups and cultures for the evolution of the drum set, but it's largely African Americans that I would attribute to bringing these drums together, merging them, and really putting them into a kit, the birth of jazz and all that. So, but prior to that, each percussive instrument was traditionally played by different individuals in like marching bands and orchestras and stuff like that. So you'd have like a snare drummer and a bass drummer. Even still in marching bands today, that's how it is. So individual like feel and expression on percussion wasn't really a thing so much. You were pretty much just keeping a beat. So the culmination of different drums and cymbals into a cohesive set played by an individual is really what birthed the creation of a whole new era of musical style and individual groove, which really blossomed. It coincided and kind of blossomed with, the expressive jazz music that was forming at that time. So D.D. Chandler is a drummer who's largely credited for some early innovations in the drum set, including he created a pedal for the bass drum. Not a commercially made thing, but he's kind of attributed for being an innovator, talented musician, real good showman as well. Kind of attributed for that. This was like the late 1800s, actually, that he did that. Playing a bass drum with your foot with a pedal. I think he was kind of known to be the first to do that. But it really was many musicians who often, put together their own drum kits, and it was a hodgepodge of different things. It really kind of evolved organically. So as many musicians who often built together their own custom sets, shared them with each other, kind of thing, over the first several decades of the 20th century, that really gave rise to the outfitting of the modern drum kit. So snare and bass drums came mostly from European military settings, soldiers, who wore the drums in a sling over the shoulder. They took and put those on the ground or on a stand, and, they weren't carrying them, so they could be more free to play them. Chinese immigrants, building railroads and other infrastructure during the Industrial Revolution, brought traditional tom-tom drums, which really stood apart in sound from the snare and the bass. So they kind of got incorporated in because they sounded really nice and kind of went into a nice mix with the other drums. And then bronze cisterns that came out of places like Turkey and China were pounded flat and made into what we know as cymbals today. So there's not one distinct person, company, or place that we can really attribute the creation of the drum set. It was something that evolved, very, very naturally in that setting, but it's really a melting pot of different cultures that came together to create it. And I just thought that was really cool. It's very, very American, right? So there were, at that time too, these were people who were overtly discriminated and excluded from especially high society music at the time. Particularly African Americans were excluded from playing in particular venues, because of some of the movements of the time, which is not a proud period of our history, but it goes to show the innovation and the passion and the drive that can come from being in that kind of situation. So they created their own form of musical expression that's really honestly gone on to shape modern music in a pretty unignorable way. And I'm incredibly grateful for those musical innovators. So, I just thought it was I was thinking whatever, what are the drum brands? Pearl or whatever, came up with the drum set in 1930 or whatever, but it's no, it's a much deeper and richer story than I anticipated. So I just wanted to share that with you all today a little bit. So yeah, that's what I got for you this week. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll hit you back next week with another Q&A. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.